I lived in an alley where the streetlights always looked tired, glowing a dull yellow like old memories that refused to fade. The air smelled like cheap alcohol and cigarette smoke. Laughter echoed through the narrow walls, but none of it ever sounded real. People assumed women like me got used to that life quickly. They were wrong. My name is Lam Ann, 23 years old. Not beautiful, not unforgettable, just someone you might glance at and think, she looks okay, before walking away. The first day I stepped into this world, I cried until my throat burned raw. But my father was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by bills thicker than any textbook I had ever owned. Some roads, you walk them even when you hate every step. At first, I kept explaining to customers that this was temporary, that I wasn't really the person they imagined. Eventually, I realized nobody cared. They didn't want explanations. They wanted a role, so I gave them one. I learned to smile in front of mirrors, learned to hold eye contact with strangers without trembling, learned how to pretend nothing touched me. But every night, after wiping off my makeup, I still avoided looking at my own reflection for too long. One rainy evening, the manager told me, "There's a new client. Difficult, but he pays well." I nodded. High payment, more medicine for my father. What I didn't know was that night would be the moment my life quietly shifted in a direction I could never undo. He sat in the corner of the room, half his face hidden in shadow. Dark suit, straight posture, eyes as cold as glass. When I walked in, he looked at me from head to toe. Not like a man judging beauty, but like someone inspecting an object.
What your name?
And
That's it?
I stayed silent. Real name or fake name, it didn't matter to people like him. That night, he didn't cross any lines, but his words were sharper than knives.
How long have you been doing this? Long enough to stop feeling ashamed?
I smiled faintly, not because I was strong, but because I was too tired to react. Before he left, he said something that lingered in my chest longer than it should have.
You're just like the rest? Anyone with money can have you.
He came back again and again, but each time felt like a test. Sometimes he made me wait for hours just to exchange a few cold sentences before leaving. Sometimes he gave unreasonable requests just to see how far I would go. I knew he wasn't there because he liked me. He was there to prove I was exactly what he believed. One evening he asked,
Do you ever feel disgusted with yourself?
Yes, I answered honestly. He paused, surprised. But I've gotten used to the feeling, I added. For the first time, his eyes softened just a little. Truthfully, I was different from many others around me. I didn't chase extra money, didn't try to seduce anyone, didn't beg clients to return. I only did enough to survive, but I never told him that. I was tired of proving I wasn't as terrible as people thought. One night, he placed a large stack of money on the table.
I want to see how far you're willing to go.
I pushed it back toward him. Keep it. His brows tightened.
Don't you need money?
I do, I said quietly, just not that much. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, then vanished behind coldness again. Not long after, everything fell apart. During an argument, he said words that made the entire room fall silent.
You think you're different? In the end, you're still selling yourself.
I didn't cry, I didn't argue. I just felt something inside me break quietly. That night, I left. No goodbyes, no explanations, no trace. Just a small suitcase, and a heart that had learned how to gather its own broken pieces. I thought leaving the city would help me forget him. But I didn't know, the moment I disappeared was the moment he started looking for me. I wasn't born heartless. Before I became in that narrow alley, I was Lam Ann, a girl who loved reading comic books and was afraid of the dark. My father used to be a long-haul truck driver. He was a quiet man, never good with words, but he always remembered to bring me a small box of sweets. After every trip, my mother ran a tiny convenience shop near our home. We weren't rich, but we lived simply, and for a long time that was enough. Until the accident. One rainy night, my father's truck overturned on a mountain pass. He survived, but his spine was severely damaged. After that came endless hospital visits, expensive medication, and bills that grew heavier by the day. My mother left when the debt became too much to bear. I continued going to school, But I also worked every job I could find. Waiting tables, handing out flyers, cleaning houses, anything that paid. Still, no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. The night I decided to step into that world, I stood outside the door for a very long time. It was raining. I remember telling myself it would only be once, just enough money for the surgery. But life is not a movie. One time became another, and then another, until it was no longer a choice, but simply the way I survived. I never told you any of this, not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because I knew that in your eyes, no reason would ever be enough to justify what I had become. There was a night when you came, and said nothing at all. You just sat there, watching me put on my makeup. You don't have to do that, you said quietly. I'm working, I replied. You stayed silent for a long moment, as if weighing something in your mind. Then you asked, almost casually, have you ever thought about leaving? I let out a faint, bitter laugh. Do you think I have that many choices? For the first time, you didn't argue. After that, something about you began to change. You were still distant, still sharp with your words. But sometimes you would walk me all the way home, without saying a single thing. One evening, I had a fever, yet I showed up anyway because I needed the money. You stared at me for a long time, before tossing a small bag of medicine onto the table. Don't misunderstand, you said. I just don't want you dying while you still owe me an appointment. I knew it was a lie, but I didn't question it. Somewhere along the way, I grew used to your presence, used to waiting for someone who always pretended to despise me. And maybe that was when my heart began to shift, slowly, quietly, out of its original place. That night, the hospital called. My father was critical. I asked the manager for permission to leave, but she refused. The booking had already been confirmed. The client was willing to pay a high price. It was you. I arrived with red eyes, and a mind exhausted to think. You looked at me and frowned. What are you trying to play tonight? The victim. I didn't answer. I only wanted everything to end quickly, so I could rush to the hospital. But you kept questioning me, kept pushing, as if you needed a reaction. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I'm tired, I whispered. You let out a cold laugh. Tired of pretending to be decent. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not pretending. Oh, you stood up, your voice hard. Then how are you any different from the others? You sell your body. You do it for money. I looked at you then. For the first time, I wanted to explain everything. About my father, about the hospital, about the fear that never left me. But before I could speak, my phone rang. It was the hospital again. I answered, listened for only a few seconds, and then my mind went completely blank. My father had passed away. I stood there without crying, without speaking. It felt as if all the sound in the room had disappeared, as if I were watching my own life from far away. He were still saying something, but I couldn't hear it clearly. The only words that reached me were the last ones. You think you're that pitiful? I placed my bag gently on the table, looked at you one final time. You're right, I said softly. I'm no different. Then I walked out. That night, I never returned to the alley again. I packed my belongings in silence. No one asked where I was going. No one tried to stop me. I boarded a midnight bus to a city where no one knew my name, and no one knew my past. I told myself that if I started over, I would forget you. But as the bus pulled away from the station, I realized something I hadn't expected. The only thing I couldn't leave behind was the memory of the man who once looked at me, with eyes filled with contempt, and something that hurt far more, because it felt like pain he was trying, desperately, to hide. I stepped off the bus while the morning was still wrapped in fog. This new city was smaller than the one I used to live in. No loud alleyways, no blinding neon lights, just the smell of toasted bread in the morning air, and the slow hum of passing motorbikes. No one looked at me with suspicion. No one knew who I used to be. I rented a tiny room on the second floor of an old house. The paint was peeling. The window stuck whenever I tried to open it, but for the first time in years, I had a place where no one knocked on my door at midnight. On my first day looking for a job, my hands shook so badly I stuttered. I had never written a proper resume. I didn't have clean experience. A small restaurant hired me as a waitress. The pay was low. The work was exhausting, but I had never felt so relieved. That night, after changing into my uniform, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. No heavy makeup, no tight dresses, just a regular girl, with her hair tied low, and an oversized t-shirt. I didn't recognize myself, but this time, I didn't feel disgusted. The first few days were hard. I flinched whenever someone raised their voice. I wasn't used to customers who only wanted more water, not to buy my time. But slowly, I learned how to smile for real. Still, when the night falls, I remember a man with cold eyes. And I hate myself for that. Min is the assistant chef at the restaurant. He isn't the kind of man who turns heads. Tall, lean, always wearing an apron dusted with flour. The first time we met, he simply nodded at me and went back to chopping vegetables. On my third day, I dropped a tray of drinks in front of customers. The crash echoed through the room. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even pick up the broken glass. Min walked over, gently pulled me behind him. "I'll handle it," he said. He didn't ask why my hands were trembling. He didn't ask why I avoided eye contact with everyone. In the days that followed, he would leave a portion of dinner for me, whenever I worked the late shift. Sometimes I got home late. He would stand outside the boarding house until he saw me and locked the door. "I just don't want anything to happen to you," he said simply. One evening, I dropped my old wallet. Inside was a photo of my father, lying in a hospital bed. Min picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then handed it back. He didn't ask. That silence made me feel safe. I never told him about my past. He never forced me to speak, but somehow, he always showed up, exactly when I needed him. One rainy afternoon, we stood under the restaurant awning after work. He handed me a cup of hot tea. "You used to live in a big city?" he asked. I nodded. Must have been a lot of sad memories there. I stayed quiet. He smiled softly. "It's okay. Tell me when you're ready. Or don't, that's okay too." That was when I realized, some people are so kind, it scares you to disappoint them. And at that exact moment, I understood something else. My heart was already too tired to fall in love again. The new city was so peaceful, I almost believed I had escaped my past. Until one day, a stranger walked into the restaurant. Dark suit, tall figure, a familiar cologne. I froze, but when he turned around, it wasn't him. I forced a smile, told myself I was being paranoid. That night I couldn't sleep. I wondered, had he ever thought about me? Then I scolded myself for still caring about a man who had hurt me that deeply. A week later, Min handed me an old newspaper. "Take a look at this," he said. In a small corner of the business section was a photo of a man I knew too well, Tran Kong. The article said he was searching for a missing woman. No name, no details. My heart pounded so hard, my hands began to shake. I folded the newspaper immediately. "Do you know him?" Min asked. I shook my head. But that night, I stood by the window for a long time. Rain fell quietly outside. I remembered the way he used to look at me, with contempt, and yet, unable to walk away. I whispered to myself, "Even if you find me, I won't go back. Because I know, if I see you again, my heart won't be strong enough to leave a second time." I thought I had gotten used to my new life. Work in the morning, cleaning in the afternoon, dinner with everyone at the restaurant at night. Small routines, repeating, comforting. They helped me forget. Until the morning Min took me to the market. The sky was still dim. Vegetable stalls were covered in dew. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of the crowded aisle. And I turned around. He looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing something important. "I know you don't want to talk about your past," he said, "but I want to talk about the future." I stayed silent. "I like you," he continued. "Not because I pity you, not because you're fragile, just because I see how strong you are." My chest tightened. I wanted to say something kind, something gentle, but my throat closed. "I'm sorry." That was all I could manage. He smiled softly. No anger, no blame. I figured. We continued shopping as if nothing had happened. But from that day on, something changed. Min was still kind, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that I didn't know how to face. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Why couldn't a good man like him make my heart move? The answer scared me, because my heart was still trapped with someone else. The rainy season came quickly. Gray afternoons made me think of my old city, the narrow alleys, the yellow streetlights, and him. I hated myself for remembering. Some nights, I dreamed I was back in that old room. He stood at the door, cold eyes, unchanged. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. When I woke up, I was crying. Min noticed the change in me. He didn't ask directly. He just left a cup of hot tea on the table. Whenever I worked late, one evening, he said quietly, "Don't force yourself to forget too fast. Some things need time." I nodded, but deep down, I knew, some people can't be forgotten, no matter how much time passes. A week later, the restaurant owner said, "Someone's been asking about the staff lately." I forced a smile, probably an old customer. But that night, I stood by the window, my heart beating faster than it should. A strange instinct kept me awake. He can't find me here. The world is too big, isn't it? That afternoon, the restaurant was unusually busy. I carried trays from table to table. Everything felt normal. Until I heard a familiar voice. "One black coffee." My hands trembled. The liquid in the glass rippled. I turned around. Tran Kong, sitting in the corner. Dark suit, same cold eyes. but something about him looked tired. Our eyes met. In that instant, every sound around us disappeared. I turned away immediately, forced my breathing to stay steady. I told the owner I wasn't feeling well, and stepped into the kitchen. Less than 5 minutes later, he walked behind the counter, and his voice was deeper than before, rough, like he hadn't slept in days. I didn't turn around. You've mistaken me for someone else. He stepped closer. I've been looking for you for almost a year. My chest ached, but I kept my voice steady. You should leave. The person you're looking for isn't here. He stood behind me for a long time. Then finally, I'm sorry. 3 words. That was all it took for the walls I had built for months to begin to crack. But I didn't turn around because I knew if I looked at him one more time, I wouldn't be strong enough to keep my distance. I left work early that day. I really believed if I walked away fast enough, I could avoid him. But the moment I stepped out, through the back door, he was already there, standing across the narrow alley, still, waiting, just like before, the same kind of alley, the same kind of silence. Only this time, I wasn't the same anymore. Are you still running away? His voice was calm, not loud, but heavy. I tightened my grip on my bag. You should go home. I've been looking for you. Everywhere. Low, steady, and I'm not leaving. Because of one sentence. I turned to face him. For the first time, in almost a year, he looked thinner, more tired, dark circles under his eyes. The sharpness I once knew was gone. Now his gaze felt different, like someone trying to hold on to the last fragile thing he had left. My heart softened, just a little, and I hated myself for that. Why did you look for me? I asked. He didn't answer right away. A few seconds passed. Then, to apologize, I let out a small laugh. Dry, almost empty. You don't have to, I said quietly. It's all in the past. No, he answered immediately. For me, it's not. I turned away. But for me, it is. I started walking, faster than before. I heard his footsteps behind me, close, but he didn't touch me. He didn't stop me. He only said one thing. Before I closed the door, I'm not leaving. That night, I sat against the door. For a long time. No lights, no tears, just the sound of rain. Soft, endless, and my heartbeat, completely out of rhythm. The next day, Min looked at me, longer than usual. Do you know him? His voice was gentle. I wanted to lie, but his eyes were too calm. Not accusing, just concerned. I nodded. An ex. I didn't know what to call him. A client, a memory, a mistake. He's my past. Min didn't ask anything else, but I saw his hand tighten around the cloth he was holding. That afternoon, Kong came back. This time, he didn't sit quietly in the corner. He waited outside for me. After my shift ended, Min saw him. No one said a word, but the air felt heavy, too heavy to breathe. I stepped outside. What do you want? Let me talk. His voice was softer now, almost careful. I was ready to refuse, but Min spoke from behind me. Go. He paused. If you don't say it clearly, you'll never be free. I turned to look at him. There was pain in his eyes, the kind he tried to hide, and somehow, that hurt me more. I followed Kong to the park nearby. We sat at opposite ends of the bench, far enough to feel like strangers. I found out about your father, he said. My body went still. I didn't know. That night, you had just lost him. His voice broke, slightly. I looked down at my hands. Knowing or not, doesn't change anything. He turned toward me. It does. A breath. At least, I can apologize. I inhaled slowly, but the emotions were already rising. Do you think an apology erases everything? He didn't answer. He only said, no, but I still need to say it. Silence fell between us. Long, uncomfortable. And then, I finally said the thing I had hidden for so long. I never hated you. He looked at me, confused, because I knew someone like me doesn't deserve respect. I said it calmly. Too calmly. He stood up immediately. Don't say that. I gave him a faint smile. It's true. I sold myself. I accepted their stares. You only said out loud what everyone else was thinking. He stepped closer. For the first time, there was no contempt in his eyes, only regret. No, he said, I was wrong. I judged you. I took my anger out on you for things that had nothing to do with you. I stayed silent. He continued, slowly, carefully. You were never like anyone else. I just refused to see it. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I turned away. It's too late. No. He shook his head. I don't want to return to the past. I want to start again. I let out a soft, tired laugh. Start again with who? A normal girl, or someone who once sold herself. He looked straight at me, no hesitation. With Lam Ann, a pause, a normal girl that I want to pursue again. From the beginning, my chest tightened, so tight, I could barely breathe, but I still stepped back, because I knew, if I moved even one step forward, I would fall into the same storm again. And this time, I wasn't sure I'd survive it. I thought he would leave after that conversation, but the next morning, when I opened the cafe door, he was standing across the street, holding 2 cups of coffee. No black suit, no cold eyes, just a man in a simple shirt, looking strangely out of place in our small neighborhood. He didn't walk toward me. He just lifted the cup slightly, like a quiet greeting. I turned away, but the next day, he was there again. And the day after that, still there. He didn't talk about the past. He didn't try to explain. He only asked simple things. Did you eat breakfast? Was the cafe busy today? It might rain. Don't forget your jacket. At first, I thought he was trying to fix everything with small gestures. But slowly, I realized he wasn't trying to erase the past. He was starting over, from the beginning, not with pity, not with guilt, just patiently standing outside my life, waiting for me to let him in. I told myself not to soften, but my heart began to tremble with every rainy day. Min saw everything. He never asked me to choose, never blamed me, never showed anger toward Kong, but every time he glanced at the cafe door, his eyes grew a little heavier. One night, after a late shift, I walked out of the alley and saw them standing at opposite ends, one holding an umbrella, the other holding a bag of food. No one spoke, but the silence between them felt unbearable. Min stepped forward first. Have you eaten? He asked softly. I shook my head. He handed me the food. I made extra. Kong didn't interrupt. He just stood there, waiting, as if the decision had always been mine. That was the moment I realized, just by existing between them, I was hurting them both. Later that night, Min said quietly, I know you haven't forgotten him. His voice was calm, almost a calm. I'm not good at competing, but I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me. There are people so gentle that you wish you could disappear, just so they won't get hurt. I started losing sleep. In the daytime, I pretended everything was fine, but at night, I sat by the window, watching the rain, wondering what I was doing. One man was a painful past I couldn't forget. The other was a gentle present. I didn't know how to love properly. One afternoon, I dropped a tray of dishes. The sound of breaking porcelain made something inside me shatter too. I ran behind the cafe and cried on the cold ground. Kong came, but didn't touch me. He just sat a short distance away. Min came later, leaning silently against the wall. No one asked why I was crying. No one forced me to speak. And somehow, that silence hurt the most. I'm tired, I whispered. I don't know what to do anymore. Kong spoke softly. You don't have to choose right now. Min nodded. Just choose what won't make you regret. And that was when I understood. The most painful choice wasn't between two men. It was learning how to forgive myself. It rained heavily that night. I left work late. The road back to my small rented room was empty. Rain struck the tin roofs in thick, relentless waves, sounding exactly like the thoughts that had been trapped inside my head for months. I thought I had learned how to carry everything alone, how to smile like nothing was wrong, how to act as if I wasn't quietly falling apart. But when I turned the familiar corner, I saw him, Tran Kong. No umbrella, no raincoat, just standing beneath the pale yellow streetlight, as if he had been waiting for a very long time. I almost turned away. Then he spoke. I won't take another step, unless you want me to. I froze. The rain was cold, and somehow, so were my tears. Why won't you just give up? I asked, my voice dissolving into the storm. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, slowly, because I once walked away, when you needed to be understood the most. I don't want to make that mistake again. I let out a small laugh, but my throat tightened. You don't owe me anything. I said, everything that happened was my choice. He shook his head gently. Maybe, but how I treated you, that was mine. I stepped closer. The distance between us slowly disappeared. I'm not perfect, I said, meeting his eyes for the first time. I'm not a good person. I've done things that make people look at me differently. He didn't look away. I'm not perfect either. He said, I've hurt people. I've judged when I had no right to. If the past decides everything, then none of us deserve the present. And that was when I broke. Not because of pain, but because for the first time, someone wasn't trying to deny my past. And wasn't using it to define me either. I'm scared, I whispered, scared that if I try again, I'll become the old version of myself. He stepped a little closer, still leaving enough space so I wouldn't feel pressured. Then we go slowly, he said, slow enough that you can stop anytime. The rain kept falling, but this time, I wasn't cold, and I finally understood something. I wasn't running from him. I was running from the fear that I wasn't worthy of love. The next morning, I went to see Min. Some conversations can't be postponed forever. We sat in the kitchen after the cafe closed. The scent of fried onions still lingered in the air, strangely comforting. I know, he said before I could speak. His calmness hurt more than anger ever could. I lowered my head. I'm sorry. He smiled softly. Don't apologize for your feelings. Love isn't something you can force. I looked at him, feeling grateful and guilty at the same time. Are you sad? I asked. He nodded. Yes, he said honestly. But I don't regret meeting you. You helped me understand something. Loving someone doesn't always mean holding them back. Sometimes it means being brave enough to let them go. Tears slipped down my face. He stood up and gently touched my head, like an older brother would. Go, he said quietly. Live the life you once longed for. That afternoon, I met Kong again, not in a dark alley, but in a small cafe, in daylight, surrounded by people. Ordinary, like any normal date. He didn't bring up the past, didn't make dramatic promises. He simply asked, where would you like to begin? I thought for a moment, then I smiled. Start by seeing me as just a normal girl. He looked at me for a long time, then he smiled. I've always wanted to. We walked under the rain that evening. No umbrellas. The rain was still cold. The past was still there. Wounds don't disappear in a single night. But for the first time, I didn't want to run, because I understood something. Loving someone isn't about erasing the past. It's about walking forward together, even if both of you have been stained by it. My name is Lam Ann, just an ordinary girl, someone who got lost, someone who once hated herself. And for the first time in years, I'm no longer afraid of the rain. There's something I've never told you. If you've ever believed you weren't worthy of love, then maybe you understand me. Some people aren't bad. They've just been through too much. So much that they begin to believe they are a flawed version of life itself. I used to think my past was a stain that could never be washed away, that if anyone knew everything, they would turn their backs on me. So I chose to leave first. I chose to be cold first. I chose to hurt myself before anyone else could look at me with disappointment. But I learned something. The scariest thing isn't the past. It's using that past to sentence yourself forever. We all make mistakes. We all lose our way. We all do things that, if given another chance, we would never do again. Or maybe, at that time, we didn't have another choice. Growing up isn't about erasing what happened. It's about daring to face it, and still giving yourself another chance. Loving someone didn't make me perfect. It simply made me brave enough to learn how to love myself. If you're still listening, and you still believe you're not worthy, remember this. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You only need to be gentle with yourself, honest with your heart, and brave enough to take one small step. Every rainy season eventually clears. And maybe one day, you'll realize you're no longer cold. Not because life became softer, but because you stopped running from your own heart. But I have to be honest about one more thing. Starting over isn't the end of hardship. A year after I chose to love again, I learned something else. Falling in love is brave, but staying, when old wounds begin to ache again, that is the hardest part. And that story belongs to another rainy season. 1 year after that rainy night, I still hate the sound of breaking dishes. Some things feel like they're long gone, but all it takes is one small sound to pull the past rushing back. That night, Kong and I had an argument. It wasn't anything dramatic. He simply forgot to pick me up after my late shift. His phone had died, and I stood there, in the rain, for almost 20 minutes. When he finally arrived, soaked, breathless, apologizing over and over, I didn't cry. I went quiet, and somehow, that silence frightened him more than anger ever could. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I didn't answer, because in my head, it wasn't about 20 minutes in the rain. It was the old fear rising again, the familiar one, the fear of being left behind, the fear of not being important enough. I hated that feeling. Hated that after a whole year, I could still feel so fragile. That night, I told him, I thought I had changed. He looked at me for a long time. "Changing doesn't mean you don't get hurt anymore," he said softly. "It means this time, you don't run away." And suddenly, I understood. A year ago, the version of me back then would have turned cold. I would have said something sharp, something cruel, just to hurt him first, before he had the chance to hurt me. But this time, I stayed. I told him the truth. "I'm not upset because you were late. I'm just scared that I don't matter." He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. "You've always mattered," he whispered, "not because you're perfect, but because you're you." We still argue sometimes. We still have exhausting days. There are moments when I say things I don't mean. But there's one difference now. No one walks away in silence anymore. A year later, I realized something. Love isn't the absence of pain. Love is when pain shows up, and instead of turning our backs, we sit down and face it together. I'm still Lam Ann. I still have a past. Still have nights when sleep won't come. But I no longer lie awake wondering if I deserve to be loved. Because he didn't stay to save me. He stayed to grow with me. About a year after Kong and I chose to start over, I saw Min again. There was no dramatic coincidence. No rain, no tension. Just an ordinary afternoon. I was grocery shopping when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Lam Ann." I turned around. There he was. Standing beside him was a petite girl with her hair neatly tied back, one hand resting on a shopping cart. He looked different. The heaviness in his eyes, the way he used to stare at doorways, was gone. He smiled, and this time, it was light. "Are you doing okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I am." He introduced the girl beside him. "This is H, my girlfriend." She smiled at me, warm, open, unguarded, and I realized something surprising. My heart didn't ache. There was only a quiet gratitude. We exchanged small talk, work, health, life, before leaving. Min looked at me for a moment. "I'm glad you chose to stay," he said. I smiled back. "Thank you for helping me understand myself." He gave a small nod. No one owed anyone anything. No one was wrong. We were simply two people who once walked through each other's lives, just long enough to learn how to let go at the right time. 3 years after that rainy night, I stand in a small kitchen, holding a warm baby bottle in my hands. In the living room, Kong is trying to fix a toy car with a loose wheel. Daddy dropped it again. A tiny voice bursts into laughter. I walk out. A 2-year-old girl sits in the middle of the floor. Slightly curly hair, bright eyes. She sees me and reaches out her arms. "Mommy." There was a time I thought I would never hear that word. I once believed my past would always be a stain that could never be erased. But now, I am the wife of a man who learned how to listen, and the mother of a little life who knows nothing about the ways I once lost myself. Kong looks at me. There's no longer guilt in his eyes. No desperate attempt to make up for something, just the steady gaze of someone who chose to stay and mend it. Are you tired? He asks. I shake my head, not because I'm not tired, but because for the first time in my life, I'm not exhausted from trying to prove that I'm worthy. That night, it rains again. I stand by the window, holding our daughter. Kong stands behind us, wrapping his arms around both of us. The rain falls just like it did 3 years ago, but there's one difference. I'm no longer the girl crying alone behind a cafe, no longer the one condemning herself for her past. I am Lam Ann, a wife, a mother, a woman who once lost her way, but found the courage to stay. And this rainy season, it's still cold outside, but inside this small house, there's warmth, there's laughter, and I know now, I'm finally home. This is the end of this story, but not the end of ours. Follow to be part of the next one.